Hi, it's Amanda Neal from Robson Laidler Wealth, and thank you for joining us for stage 4 in our financial planning life stages. So just as a bit of a recap, we had Andy starting work, that was number 1, and all the issues around that. And then when he had a young family, that's number 2. We joined Andy and Sarah about 10 years ago when they were thinking about how to plan for university and maybe consider how they could use some surplus income to hopefully retire early. And what we're going to do now is kind of join them in the stage where they're age 59 and they're looking to retire in about 12 months or so, and they just kind of want to know if that's something they can do. They want to give a gift to their son. They've already given a gift to their daughter to get her on the housing ladder. Everybody's pretty much financially independent, and they're through university now. And so Andy and Sarah are really just concentrating on themselves, and they just want to know whether they can, retire at that particular age and be okay and not run out of money. And that's why we're going to help them. And it's not dissimilar to the sort of planning that we do for lots of clients, and indeed for ourselves, because we're in a similar situation, not retiring absolutely yet, obviously ages away, but we have had 2 children, putting them through uni, and hopefully plan to help them a little bit as well. So I'll just hand over to Neil and just going to go through the plan with you.
So if you've been following us today, you'll be familiar with the look of this financial planning software that used. This is just the initial input, so similar details to previously. I won't spend too long on this, but just to give you a bit of a feel for where Andy and Sarah are at. We've got their incomes here from their work. 90 grand for Andy and 50 grand a year for Sarah. We've got some savings and investments. They've been saving quite a bit, reduced and repaid their mortgage, and managed to put some surplus income into savings and also to investment ISAs, which is helpful.
They've actually had quite a jump up in pay over the last 10 years, and they've actually managed to, that's why they've managed to save a bit more. And they've also benefited from really significant growth in the stock market over that period as well. Yeah. So that's why their pensions and investments have jumped up quite a bit.
Okay, we've got the property. We've got a planning item in there, which I'll show you in a second. As Amanda said, they've managed to sort of divert some surplus from higher income into pensions and investments. So their pension values are up from where they were previously. And we've also assumed that they will get the maximum state pension at the relevant state pension age in their sort of mid to late 60s. In terms of their lifestyle expenses, those have also maybe risen a little bit. So we've categorized them in a number of different ways. The basic spending, so utilities, travel to work, etc. We've got that roughly about £3,000 a month. Got some additional spend about £1,000 a month on the kind of nice to have stuff, weekends away, eating out, hobbies, etc. And we've also built in something for travel expenses, holidays, and so forth. We've also considered that Andy at the moment has a company car, and he will therefore need to replace that car when he retires. So we've got an assumption in for some funding for car. And as Amanda mentioned in the introduction, their younger child, Sam, has now finished university, but they want to equalise the sort of gifts that they helped with our daughter Lucy. They want to do something similar for Sam. So we've built in an assumption that they will make a gift of £25,000 to Sam. So that's all the input. What does that then look like in terms of the cash flow? Again, hopefully you're familiar with the look of these graphs. I won't build it up too far. Just show you initially what the plan looks like without any income. So we're just seeing red on the screen. Hopefully, there we are. This shows both the expenditure that we've just touched on, some tax as well, and you can see that the graph's rising from left to right. That's the assumption about inflation. We're all familiar with the cost of living crisis that we're apparently going through at the moment. So inflation is built into that. All I'm going to do is overlay that with income in the form of earnings or pension or investments. So I'll just show you that now. So they're still working. We've assumed they're going to work on for another year. That sort of mid-blue colour is simply their salary for that year. And you can see that there's a bit above the black line in this first year. That's surplus income. So that's surplus on top of what they assume to spend, including tax. They retire next year, they start drawing down from their savings. That's sort of mid-blue, light blue colours. That's taking withdrawals from their ISAs and their cash reserves. And we also assume that they use some of their pension funds up to the personal allowance threshold. So just making best use of the tax allowances that they've got. So those orange bars represent them both withdrawing an amount of money from their pensions to use up their personal allowance. That means they don't have to take quite as much out of savings and investments, and that means that the liquid assets, the investments, the pensions last that little bit longer.
I mean, on that, it's really important when you're a couple and you to really consider what your various tax allowances are, and particularly that's really relevant when you're actually drawing an income, when you're starting to what we call stop accumulating wealth, but you're starting to decumulate. And that's where we feel we add quite a lot of value when we help clients going forward, just to sort of maximise all these allowances and hopefully, you know, by not paying tax on a lot of their investment growth, just extend the life of their savings and investments and their pensions.
So it's still a bit of red in the screen, but as we mentioned, we're assuming that they have some state pensions. That's the dark blue, navy blue colour coming in from 68. And that helps with some additional secure income. So you can see straight away that Andy and Sarah are covering their expenditure almost up to age 90 with the assumptions that we make. Still a bit of a shortfall. So if they've got some longevity on their side, they may be worried about that bit of red at the end of the timeline. But we'll have a look at a couple of strategies that they can consider there. Before I do that, I'm just going to pop quickly over to their asset picture, take out the details. The purple at the bottom is simply property wealth. I'm going to take that out for the time being. And you can see 3 different colours. We've got the deep pink sliver at the bottom. That's their cash reserve. And we've assumed a minimum cash reserve of £20,000 going forward, just to make sure they've got some cash. The navy blue is their ISA investments, and they're spending those down over the next 10 years or so, and then the green bars at the top, that's their pension fund, and that's also diminishing over time with the withdrawals that they're making. So we'll just pop back to the cash flow and talk about a couple of different options they might have to extend the life of their income and resources for a further period. So the obvious thing they could do is defer retirement. That's one of the main levers they can do. So if we push that along another couple of years, we could probably see that their money will last a bit longer, and they might remove that shortfall at the end.
But I think they've kind of fairly adamant that they really don't want to do that unless things look really bad, and they're very much planning to stop work quite soon. So yeah.
Another thing they can look at is the risk that they take on their investments. Our standard default assumption is they achieve a return of 5% a year after charges. That's an achievable return from the type of investments that we typically arrange for clients. But obviously that, in this case, is insufficient to see them to the financial finish line at age 100. So we can use the system to determine what investment return they would need to avoid that shortfall. Again, just go back to the screen we've been at and ask the system to work out what sort of return they need. Now, this will drive out a percentage rate. And then from that, we can then start to have a discussion with the relevant client about what sort of risk they're prepared to take. In this example, we can see the number at the bottom of the screen is 6% per annum. So that would, in our view, represent one step up on the risk scale, the volatility scale for this particular client. Now, they may or may not be prepared to accept that, but if they could, that's an achievable return. So that's one way of solving that problem. And then the final option they've got is to consider the use of their home. Downsizing is often a strategy that many people consider, so we've built that in as well. And I'm just going to assume that happens when the couple are 75.
I mean, it's very unusual that you would be in your family home right up until, I mean, some people do, and that's fair enough, but, a lot of people do consider the sort of maintenance element and just sort of ease when they get older, and also heating costs and things like that's quite relevant at the moment. So yeah, it's worth looking at.
Okay, so All I've done is assume that the downside event happens at 75 and see a big spike in the middle of the graph, the yellow. So what's happened there is they've sold their existing home for the equivalent of 550,000 in future terms, and they've bought a replacement home for a bit lower, 350,000 in today's terms. And then the surplus, the 200,000 or the equivalent of that in a few years' time, they've invested most of that into an investment portfolio, which then can generate some returns, and then they can draw down from that. And you can see that that in itself pretty much solves the problem. It gives them enough extra capital and therefore extra income to get them towards the end of that financial finish line. So I think that's just an example of one or two different strategies that we might typically deploy with the clients that we work with, and indeed ourselves in our own planning. Those are the sort of issues that we've considered for ourselves. So hopefully you found that of use. Hopefully it's stimulated some thought. And obviously, as always, if you want to know more about our financial planning process, we'd be delighted to talk to you about that.
Yeah.
So thanks again for joining us. And hopefully you can join us the next time when we're considering estate planning.
Yeah.